Once again, I just want to welcome you to our Animal Justice Academy Lunchtime Live. I'm Kimberly Carroll. I'm the director of AJA, and our topic tonight is From Cattle Rancher to Animal Activist with Renee King-Sonnen from the Rowdy Girl Sanctuary. Woohoo! Welcome, Renee.
Thank you. Thank
Aw.
you so much for that great welcome, and it's so good to see everyone.
Oh, Renee, it is so wonderful to have you here. And it's so wonderful to have all these lovely beings here live. And a welcome to those of you who are also joining the replay. We appreciate you too. So Renee, let me give you a proper introduction, okay? Renee is a native Texan. She's the executive director and founder of Rowdy Girl Sanctuary and their initiative, the Rancher Advocacy Program in Walder. Is it Walder, Texas? Did I get that right, Renee?
Welder.
Okay. And Welder, which is just outside of Austin. So Renee remarried her husband, Tommy Sonnen, a multi-generational cattle rancher in 2009 and moved to their former ranch in Angleton, Texas. But after she went vegan in 2014, all hell broke loose and she turned a beef cattle operation in the heart of Texas, cattle country, into an animal sanctuary. As a result, the Rancher Advocacy Program was launched to inspire farms and ranches to consider transitioning into compassionate farm enterprises without animal cruelty. And at the end of the month, a documentary about Renee and Rowdy Girl Sanctuary's fascinating story will premiere at North America's premier documentary festival, Hot Docs International Film Festival in Toronto. So we wanted to have Renee here in advance of that because it's a very exciting thing, Renee. And we'll get into the documentary in a second, but us AJers are so happy to hear that you're being recognized on this bigger level. Amazing.
Thank you so much.
And so I have to remember Renee's in rural country, and so there's a little bit of a delay. And just so you folks know, we'll have a little delay, but don't worry. Renee and I are enough energy to fill up any space, right, Renee?
Yes, ma'am. We'll get it done.
Yeah. So Renee, I got to meet you at the AVA summit last summer for the first time. And I first heard about your documentary and how it's premiering at one of the world's most prestigious documentary festivals. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I want you to really lay down. I want you to tell us a story. Tell us about how the Rowdy Girl Sanctuary and the work you do. And then we're going to get into how it came to be. Okay, so give us a little rundown of Rowdy Girl Sanctuary.
Okay, well, the big rundown is I'm a native Texan, like you said. I married my husband Tommy for the second time in 2015. I moved in with him in 2010, and I moved in with him in 2009, and I had no desire to move on to the cattle ranch. I really wanted to stay in town where I was selling real estate at the time and doing quite well. But it was kind of like that Green Acres sitcom, if you ever saw it, where I think it was Zsa Zsa Gabor or and some other guy, Brian Wheat, it was like one of them wanted to go to the city, one of them wanted to go to the country, and finally the country life won, and kicking and screaming, I moved to the country. I had a collection of leather boots. I went to rodeos all the time, at the Houston Livestock Show. I was very much a part of the whole Texas culture, barbecue cook-offs, chili cook-offs, but I was kind of like the rhinestone cowgirl. I wasn't like the kind of cowgirl that was in the mud, opening fences, baling hay, and taking care of cows. So when I moved on to the cattle ranch, I was, not interested in the work. I was a yoga teacher, also was into meditation. I loved animals, had a bunch of cats and dogs and ferrets and raccoons even, but never considered, the fact that I could ever love a cow. It didn't even make sense to my brain. I know now why, but I started falling in love with the cows when my husband tried to get me more involved with cattle ranching by instigating something that he now says, I'm glad I did it now, but if I'd have known this was going to happen, I don't know if I'd have done it or not. So he was trying to get me more involved, and he told me about these two calves that needed a mama. One of them I ended up naming Rowdy Girl. I had never had kids on my own, of my own. So when he told me about this, I was very interested because they needed to be bottle fed. They didn't have a mama. And I, to this day, don't know why they didn't have a mama. I can only imagine now. But I went and I bought those two calves. They were very frail, very little. Bobo died within the next 2 weeks. She never got, her mother's milk, colostrum, so she passed away. But Rowdy Girl thrived, and little Rowdy Girl became my reason for wanting to get up in the morning. And I just loved feeding her. I loved calling her. I would go Rowdy real loud like that, and she'd just come running. And I would feed her and just bonded with her. And as I began to bond with her, it was the most interesting thing that began to happen. I began to get a visual of all the other cows in the pasture. It was as if when I was feeding her, my senses were heightened and I could see all the different individual characteristics of all the cows. I'd never noticed before. They were all black Angus. They were all black cows for the most part. We had a few red ones, but most of them were just solid black, no markings, nothing. And I began to tell them apart one by one, and I began to name them. And my husband was like, Renee, you got to quit naming them cows. And, I was like, well, I can't help it. It's almost as if they were naming themselves and just, it's just coming out of my mouth. And anyway, long story short there, the fact of the matter is, it's not a short story. It took me 5 years to go vegan on a cattle ranch because I didn't know I was going vegan. Rowdy Girl was my vegan advocate. I didn't have a vegan advocate waving a flag or throwing blood on themselves or chanting. I didn't have that. All I had was Rowdy Girl, nudging me to pay attention. And as she did, I began to do my research, and I began to see, that, animals were tortured in this industry. And my husband told me, oh, it's all PETA propaganda. You can't believe all that stuff. So I began to go deeper into, is this really PETA propaganda? Because I always want to know things. And so I began to discover that it wasn't PETA propaganda, that it was the truth. And I tried to do better by doing all humane meat, all humane milk. We started getting our milk from a local dairy, and all the milk bottles had the name of the animal on it. So I felt so much more justified and better because I knew who I was drinking the milk from. And then I began to look into the fact that even those small dairy farms sold off the male calves, and that they too were oftentimes just tossed aside as waste or killed, and just killed. And I began to go crazy, literally. It took me 5 years to lose my mind to the point to where I told my husband, what happened was on October 31st, 2014, Halloween, we were getting ready to go to my mother-in-law's house where she was going to have a big gathering for all the kids and everybody for Halloween, like we did every year. Every year we went there, and there was a big block party for all the kids in their costumes. And the grown-ups would meet and just eat and talk and whatever. And so on this particular day, I had stumbled on Melanie Joy's dissertation on carnism. And I didn't know Dr. Melanie Joy. I had no idea who she was. All I know is I was crying every day. My husband was like, Renee, you need to stop watching all that stuff. And I couldn't stop watching it. I was the person that was watching everything, crying every day. And then on this particular day, I stumbled on Melanie Joy, and everybody was sitting at the kitchen table enjoying beef stew. And I watched, and all of a sudden I was in the story. She was talking to the people at the table, and somebody said, well, what's the recipe? This is so good. And she said, well, you start off with a pound of very young golden retriever. And whenever she said that, I was just like, oh my God, I could be eating a puppy dog and not even know it. And it registered for the first time in my life. And I just was like, oh my God. And then there was a little bit of a silence, and then she said, "Oh, just kidding, it's really a cow." And I was so mad, and everybody that was at the table was like, and they couldn't keep eating. They could not resume eating because the image of a puppy dog was in their mind. And this is cognitive dissonance. This is where it all starts. I didn't realize it, but I too was in the middle of all that. So Tommy was like, Renee, let's go. We got to go. So he said, pull yourself together. And so I put on my makeup, went to my mother-in-law's, walked in the house, all the costumes, all the kids, everybody's talking. And my mother-in-law comes out with a big pot of beef stew.
Wow.
In the exact moment I was in the script, I knew my lines. I knew what was going to happen next. And, and she was like, would you like a bowl of beef stew? And I was like, oh my God, I can't eat that. And I just was like, I can't eat that. And it just kind of like, this is 5 years of me torturing myself every day with slaughterhouse videos, boom, boom, boom. And then on this particular day, I couldn't do it anymore. And she said, why not, Renee? I said, because it's got floating dead, hacked up animal bodies in it, and I can't eat it. And everybody stopped talking. The whole room got quiet. The kids looked at me. My husband's mouth fell open. My mother-in-law was aghast. And she said, what? And I repeated myself in the silence. It's got floating dead, hacked up animal bodies in it, and I can't eat it. And she said, in the silence, she said, well, Renee, you could pick it out. And I said, nope, there's no more picking it out for me. In that moment, I slid down a rabbit hole to never return. And I made my husband's life a living hell. And from there, it was on. And, I threatened my husband at every turn. I, eventually, told him that if he sent those animals to the sale barn one more time, I was going to buy them all back. I was going to bring them all back home and, on his credit card. And I threatened him at every turn. I was choosing the lives of those cows over my marriage. Our marriage was in the balance. And anyway, I didn't know then that my conversion to veganism on a cattle ranch was going to turn into a Rowdy Girl documentary. I had no idea that anything like this was happening. I just knew that they had become my family and I couldn't do it anymore.
And so then Renee, at that point, there was a whole flurry of fundraising. Tell us about what actually happened and how that transition happened from cattle ranch to sanctuary.
Yeah, so during that time, my husband was, to his credit, he was very open-minded. I met my first vegan friend named Jeannie Westfall on the vegan registry. And the night I went vegan, I realized that I needed to find some friends. I didn't have any vegan friends other than Rowdy Girl. And so I was terrified. I felt so alone. So I just started typing as fast as I could. And I found the vegan registry. It was like 2 a.m. on November 1st, 2014. And there was this lady named Jeannie that started messaging with me back and forth. And she gave me her number and I cried my eyes out on the phone to her. And I didn't know her. She'd been vegan a long time. She lives in Oregon, near California. She's been to Rowdy Girl several times. She's a good friend, been a member for years, her and her husband. But she's my very first vegan friend. And she began telling me all about these documentaries that I had never heard of. And I got them all. And my husband watched them all with me.
Wow.
To his credit, he watched them all.
Yeah.
And
that's incredible, Renee, because that's livelihood. That's not only his livelihood, but his identity was all wrapped up in this. And he was still willing to sit down and watch. That is incredible.
Yeah, he did. And he watched Cowspiracy. He watched What the Health. He watched Forks Over Knives. He watched the one with Harold Brown in it. I can't remember the name of it, but and then he watched Speciesism. He watched, he didn't watch Earthlings at that time. He watched it later, but it was nuts. It was crazy that he was watching all this. He was still madder than hell. He was mad at me because he didn't know, any better. And eventually the forks over knives education started getting to him more than anything, because his
Really?
father had died of a heart attack at 62 years old. His father had died of a heart attack. And so that entire information about the health aspects began to awaken him to consider changing. And then the cowspiracy one on the environment began to wake him up. And he's a full-blown ethical vegan now for the animals, but he started with health, and then it was environment, and now that man is 100% an ethical vegan, and he will even call himself an animal rights activist, which is crazy.
Amazing.
So, yeah, the fundraiser. What happened was he came to me one day and he said, Renee, you need to get out of my business. You need to, because I was blocking him. I wouldn't let him sell the cows. They were all breeding. They were having babies. And he said, Renee, we can't keep doing this. I got to sell some of these calves. This is what a cattle rancher does. They have a cow-calf operation. They breed. They sell the calves. They sell the calves at 6 months old. This is what we did over and over again. When they're 6 months old, they're sold to a sale barn and they're auctioned off. And so I was not letting him do that. So we were just having more and more babies. And he says, Renee, we got to do something here. I don't have enough land, And I said, well, I'm sorry, you can't. And I didn't really understand all that at the time. All I knew is I couldn't do it anymore. If he sold those animals, he was going to have to do it over my dead body, basically. And it was, he told me, he said, Renee, you need to get out of the way. And I said, well, look, and at this point in time, I had started a Facebook page called Vegan Journal of a Rancher's Wife. And I had met a bunch of people, and it was all done in secret. Tommy didn't know I had this journal because I needed people to talk to. As soon as I met Jeannie said, Renee, you need a blog. You need a way to express yourself about all this. You need to get more people behind you. So I did that, and I'd never done anything like that. And all of a sudden, I was amassing hundreds of followers every day. And now there's thousands on that page. That was my very first page ever. Wow. And so I started talking about this, crying about this. That's how I met Kip Anderson. That's how I met a bunch of other people. I eventually found out about Howard Lyman through that page. I eventually connected to Howard Lyman. He began to help me shape the way I was thinking about all this. Kip Anderson told me how to do the fundraiser because he had just used Indiegogo to raise all the money for Cowspiracy. And so without even thinking about it, I just kept saying, yes, I'm going to buy my husband's cows. Did I know what I was going to do? No, I had no idea. All I knew is I had to buy them because he couldn't just give them to me. At the time, there's no way he could just say, hey, Renee, take my cows, there was too much money. It's all property, and so he always says, if I'd have known now what I known then, if I'd have known then what I know now, I'd have just given you my cows. He had no idea all this was going to happen either. But I went on ahead and told him, I said, well, look, because I had this following behind me. He didn't know it was all secret. It was all a big secret. And I said, look, I tell you what, you want me to get out of your way, get out of your life, get out of your business. I said, I tell you what, I will do that, but you let me buy your cows. Just let me buy the cows and we'll call it a day. And he said, you buy my cows? What are you talking about? I said, yep, I want to buy every one of them. And he says, well, what are you going to do with them? I said, I'm going to start a sanctuary. He laughed at me. He said, a sanctuary for cows? I said, yes. He said, Renee, this ain't California. This ain't New York. This is freaking Texas. And I said, well, I said, then I guess there needs to be one here, because if there ain't one, there needs to be one. And I kept looking at things like that. And he said, okay, Renee, I'll let you buy my cows. Sure. And I said, okay, well, if you were going to sell them today, how much would you sell them for? And he said, oh, he kind of laughed and him-hawed. I could probably get blah, 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 36,000, 40,000 maybe if there's a bunch pregnant, and there is. He said, I could get a whole lot more, probably 40,000, and I said, well, how much would you sell them to your wife for? He said, oh, yeah, okay, Renee, I'll give to you for 30. I said, you got a deal. I said, and how much would you let me lease the land for? I said, can you let me lease the land for $1 a year for 1 year. He said, sure, Renee. I said, how about 2 years? He said, you got a deal. And so I went to my Facebook group, Vegan Journal of a Rancher's Wife, and I started. And next thing you know, I had a fundraiser to save all those cows from going to slaughter. And within 4 months, I raised $36,000 and bought his cows, started a nonprofit. And every step along the way, Tommy changed. He began to like freak out. You know, every time all this money would come in, he couldn't believe people wanted to help me buy his cows. And he couldn't believe those people like that out there. And he began to talk to people. He ended up meeting Kip Anderson. I had a big festival on May 2nd, 2015, and Tommy went vegan on May 3rd. And so at that festival, Kip Anderson came and was one of our speakers. And that was the day we raised all the rest of the money we needed to take it over the finish line.
Amazing. And so you had this plan for a sanctuary and you're like, I'm just going to do it and we'll just see if the money will come.
That's exactly what I did. And I knew, you see, Kimberly, I have a very strong entrepreneurial background, business background. I never worked like in traditional settings. I always, was my own breadwinner. I had a band for many years on the road. I built a medical spa with a dog. I mean, I've always been this entrepreneurial person that has no problem creating, building, and making money. That was never a problem for me. And so when this happened, it just was logical to me that I'm going to figure it out. I always figured out everything else before. And so, And so, but I didn't know what I was going to do. I did not know how to do it. And when Howard Lyman, when I finally talked to Howard Lyman on Christmas Eve, 2014, I was so upset at that time. Tommy and I were fighting a lot. And I had been trying to reach Howard Lyman, which I didn't know how hard it was going to be to reach him because I didn't realize how.
Renee, can I interrupt for a second? Can we explain who Howard Lyman is for those that don't know? So Howard Lyman was the farmer who went on Oprah, I believe, right? And talked about beef, and then that's what got Oprah sued. Is that right, Renee?
Yeah, it was the whole thing about the disease they got. What was that disease?
Mad cow disease.
Mad cow disease, yes. Yeah, it was mad cow disease. And so Howard Lyman, he sold out. He didn't save all his cows from slaughter, but he got totally out of the business. He used to have a factory farm, and he's vegan. And he's got a book called The Mad Cowboy. Yeah. And anyway, I had heard about him through all these people, and they said, and there was nobody else for me to talk to. It was like, who am I going to talk to? And so his name came up as the one person that maybe would understand me. And so I finally got his attention after lots of tries. And on Christmas Eve, he answered the phone. And he talked to me for about 20 minutes. And he helped me to see my husband as a kind person again. He helped me understand that Tommy was acting from his culture. He was a very good man, and he was doing everything from the way he was brought up. And he said, how about you start treating your husband the way you're treating them animals? And I was like, oh my God, I'll never forget that, because I was treating Tommy so bad. I was calling him a murderer. I wouldn't come home. I mean, when I say I wouldn't come home, I lived with the cows basically every second of the day for a couple of months. I would get up in the morning, take me a lunch, take my guitar, and I would just go and be with the cows. I didn't want to be at home because there were deer heads everywhere. We were fighting all the time. I had thrown out all the meat of the house. I wouldn't let him bring meat home. So if he was going to eat, he was going to eat it out. And it was just very tense. And so I just lived with the cows. And I told Mr. Lyman, I said, I don't want to go home. I just want to stay with the cow. I mean, at that point in time, I was bonding with them, and I'm like part of the herd. Like I just got this tattoo and it's still fresh. I only got it like 5-6 days ago, but that's Houdini. That's Rowdy Girl's firstborn. And I consider her my granddaughter, you know? And so, I mean, it's real for me. These cows are like my family. And that's what happened. And, you know, there was no getting around it.
And so, you know, I want to hear more about reactions to this shift and everything. But is this the story that you told? Is this basically the story of Rowdy Girl, the documentary that what they explore? They explore your story. Tell us about the documentary. Tell us about how it came to be.
Well, Jason Goldman is the filmmaker and producer, and Jason reached out to me about 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, I guess, and asked me if he could document my life. And I was like, you know, I had people want to do that before, and you know, people contact me all the time wanting to do this, that, or the other, and you know, I've learned to take it all with a grain of salt and do a lot of investigation. And I asked him a lot of questions, and he was so sincere. He was the most sincere person. He wanted nothing more than to just follow me around and document my story as it unfolded. He is an observational filmmaker, and so he captures our story as it's happening. He didn't ask me a bunch of questions in an interview. What you see is what you get in this documentary. He came and spent a week or two at a time. When he would come, he would cook for us. He would follow me and Tommy around. No matter what was going on at the sanctuary, he would document it. He has tons of footage, and he created 72 minutes of the most captivating scenes. And we have a lot of outtakes that are going to also be used in the Impact campaign. We're going to be going on tour with this documentary in the heart of cattle country all over the country. And so there's a lot to unpack regarding this. I mean, he didn't just ask a bunch of questions to know my story. You can get that by just Googling it. You know, we've been organically on hundreds of media channels, including CBS Evening News, Animal Planet, ABC. I mean, our story's been told all over. And so that's not what he wanted to do. He wanted to be with us, and he wanted to capture the heart of who we are, and he did that. So when you watch the film, you're pulled into the story as it's unfolding.
And how did Moby get involved, Renee?
Well, Moby and I connected for the first time. I think it was in 2016 when I won an award called the Vegan Rookie Activist of the Year Award. I didn't know I'd even entered it. I never even entered it, but I got that award. And they asked me to come and speak at the Animal Rights Conference at the time. And I was put front and center, you know, with Moby, with Jane Velez Mitchell, with Leilani, and some other very prominent vegan activists that I didn't even know was famous. I had no idea who they were. I didn't know I was being put in that circle. I just showed up, and Moby was sitting right next to me, and we have a lot in common. And I really love Moby, and he started following our journey a long time ago, so he knew our story. Whenever I had my double jaw surgery a couple years ago, he did a video, you know, for us and to help inspire our audiences. He's always been a big fan and follower. And so Jason reached out to him and asked him, and he said yes right away.
Amazing. So he's executive producer? Yeah,
yes,
wonderful.
He's the executive producer. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, we're getting wonderful. Some people saw a special viewing of your documentary. Isabella said, I saw it and it was pure soul shine. As someone else said, just get ready with the tissues. Amazing. And so, yeah, so folks, I mean, what we really want to do, especially for those of you that are in the Toronto area or that know people in the Toronto area, we really want to sell these two screenings out. There's 2 screenings at Hot Docs at the end of the month. Tell us about those screenings because you're going to be there, Renee.
I am, and so is Tommy. Tommy
Yes.
never leaves, and when he's out, it's like, oh my God. So the first one is April 29th. It's going to be at the Isabel Bader Theater. I think it's at 8:15. I think at 8:15. And then the second one is May 3rd at the TIFF Theater.
Yeah,
I don't
big one,
know.
big theater.
Yeah, it's at 9 o'clock, I think.
Okay.
And I know that there's a lot, I'm going to be in some receptions. Anita's helping to arrange some gatherings. I
Anita
know I'm going to
Price,
get to
yeah.
go see Esther the Wonder Pig. I'm looking forward to seeing Esther the Wonder Pig.
Amazing.
And,
Yeah.
so y'all please come say hello. We're going to be in a
Mhm.
Q&A and all that.
Amazing. So we've put all of the ticket information in the chat. And somebody said that you can also, I believe this is true, but I can't verify it right at the moment, that with the Hot Docs, you can also buy a ticket to screen it online. And so, yeah, Ina's nodding her head and saying that's the case. Okay, great. So you don't need to be in Toronto. You can still be part of the big debut.
Only in Canada, I think.
Only in Canada.
There's
Okay.
no, I don't think you can see it live streamed unless you're in Canada. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, and Erin Michelle says, "Yep." Okay, so great. So, but we really want to try to show up in person, folks. So, make sure that you're telling everybody you know. And Cheryl had said in the comments, I need to bring some non-vegans to this doc. So, yeah, all the non-vegans let's get them in there. This is Renee, your story is one that speaks so well to those that have actually never, or who aren't vegan, because you really show quite a few different things. First of all, that you could not think about this for most of your life, and then all of a sudden it can become this huge rabbit hole you go down. It does, and that you don't necessarily transition overnight. That sometimes it takes a lot to be able to transition you, especially if you're really steeped in the culture of carnism, if you're really steeped in the culture of and especially if it's part of your identity and your part of how you make money. Those are some huge barriers to making this shift. So I love it. I love this as a vehicle for introducing non-vegans to this idea. So Renee, I also, I mentioned that here at Animal Justice Academy, we're all animal advocates that are working on a lot of initiatives and a lot around farmed animals. And so I really want to pick your brain a little bit more because we don't often get the inside peek into sort of deeper farm country. I come from farm country myself and some farm family, but generally a lot of us do not have that insight. And so I'm curious to hear what have been some of the reactions that you've gotten from people in Texas, people in the industry. Have there been any light bulbs, first of all? I'm sure there's been a lot of not so favorable sort of reactions, but what have been some of the light bulbs that you've seen in other people in the industry?
Great question. We are really supported by people around us, people that are in the cattle ranching families. We don't get a lot of problems. It's very opposite than what most people would think, because cattle ranchers are really kind of like the salt of the earth. And once our story went viral on CBS Evening News, I mean, we had a publicist do a score for us, and some of our stories, 6 of them scheduled in the Moz ratings, like really high. And these are all organic organic stories, never done on purpose. So what happened is our story would land in the laps of everyday cattle ranchers and farmers. It would just, they'd be sitting there eating their dinner, and all of a sudden we're in their view. Our story's being told to them while they're eating. So in that moment, that cognitive dissonance was broken. Every cattle rancher I know loves animals and kills them. They're kind people. They're good people. This is the sticking point that most vegans can't fathom, is that cattle ranchers love and kill animals. And they do. That is the program. So to break that program requires people that are in the industry to go vegan so that they can get into the back door of their consciousness. There's no way to really talk to a cattle rancher unless, in my opinion, and in my experience, unless you know that language. It's like trying to speak Egyptian to somebody that you really love and appreciate, but you don't know the language. They're just going to walk away and go, well, I didn't hear a word you said. And it's the same way here. And so, you know, we have cattle ranchers that donate to Rowdy Girl. We have cattle ranchers that are members of our organization. We have cattle ranchers that call us, their wives call us and say, Renee, you know, I saw your story, or my daughter told me about your story. I watched it. And they just start bawling on the phone to me, telling me about these cows they've fallen in love with. Can you help me? And so, like, we have a cattle rancher family that comes to see us regularly. They're an older couple, and we have 2 of their cows and their babies here at Rowdy Girl, a little bit in Savannah, and Grace and Randy. Those would have been slaughtered right now had we not taken them. And the reason we have them here is because that rancher's wife said to me, Renee, if I started bottle feeding this cow whenever she showed up on our property, she started having babies here. She's had all her babies sold except this last one. She's got mastitis real bad. My husband says she's got to go. We got to sell her. And she's bonded with this cow. All the other cows are just like Grace, but she bonded with that one. And so she can't see that one go. And good Christian, I tell you, most of the people I mix it up with are Christian conservatives, because that is the demographic. That is the market of most cattle ranchers that I'm trying to shoot for to go vegan, to change. You know, we don't want to just speak to the choir, right? I mean, everybody around knows, you know, go vegan in our animal rights community. But how are you gonna penetrate the demographic that everybody thinks can't be touched? Converting cattle ranchers to go vegan. So
wow,
yeah, I have a lot of them here. I mean, there's stories in the documentary. I talked to cattle ranchers in the documentary. Yeah.
You know, Renee, I think this is such an important piece because in the animal rights movement, we can have a way of villainizing farmers. And I'm always an advocate of let's villainize the system, not the individuals. And I know, as I mentioned, I have some family who are in farming. I'm from Manitoba, and I remember talking to one of my cousins a while ago, and you know, was a wheat farmer, but always had 100 cows as well to sell and to raise and sell. And so he was confiding in me and saying, you know, like I have such pride. I take such good care of these animals, and it's breaking my heart to send them to the feedlots now, because I know that they're going to be spending a couple of years in hell. And it was really messing with him. And so, you know, that really hit home to me. Like they're not liking the system either. Like a lot of them aren't liking the system either. And so it's really, it's not good for us as activists to be holding hate in our heart. First of all, we're never going to be able to reach people, and we're never going to be able to reach farmers, but we're also not going to be able to reach the public, because farmers are, are held in great esteem for supplying food. Whether they're plant farmers or animal farmers, they have this place in society, in our culture. And so by just going after farmers and villainizing them straight out, it's not a good strategy.
No, it's not a good strategy. And that's why right behind the tour, right behind the film, I have a book that will be published, looks like in October. And it's going to tell anything that the film could not include is going to tell all. The book tells everything. And so the book is coming out in October. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Renee, what are some other things that we should keep in mind as animal advocates in the farmed animal arena, as far as when it comes to our messaging about animal farmers or the animal ag industry? Anything else that we should sort of try to keep in mind?
Well, that's a good question, Kimberly. And, I am very known for wanting to end animal agriculture. I am very, very upfront about it. I want to end animal agriculture, the system of animal agriculture. Cattle ranchers and, your everyday farmers are not the problem. It's the system. And so if we're gonna communicate to farmers that they're not creating the system, they're just in it, then we have to be able to talk to them as if they matter. We have to talk to them in a way that respects them. They come from a long history of culture programming. It's cultural programming. It's violence that has been normalized. We all are a part of it. So if we're going to speak to them, we got to be able to have a conversation with them, so that when they leave that conversation, they feel heard, they feel respected, and they heard something we had to say. If we go at them judgmental or trying to force them to hear something, they're not going to leave having heard anything. They're going to leave having felt like they just talked to a crazy vegan. And the last thing you want to come across when you're talking to a cattle rancher, you don't want to come across as one of those crazy vegans, and that's the way we're known. Back, cattle ranchers, all the ones I talk to, and I talk to a lot, they go, man, you're nothing like those crazy vegans. And that's what I hear over and over and over. So if you want to get to a cattle rancher, please don't be a crazy vegan. You got to determine other ways to get their attention, so they'll listen and hear you. And so I've often thought, I need to do workshops on this, and what I'm going to do, but how do you do that? With the tour, we're going to be going on tour. It's going to be an impact campaign. It's not just going to be a tour because we want to go see the world. We are going to be creating an impact campaign in rural America. We're going to take the film and the book, and we're going to have educational materials created. We are going to do everything we can to create the type of format and programming that we need to go into schools, K through 12 and universities, and also faith-based communities. So if you're that's what my target is, man. I want to educate, and I want to get into faith-based communities and talk to people that can't normally talk to vegans. They don't know how to talk to vegans.
Yes, absolutely. I love this. So the documentary for you, Renee, is really a jumping off point to be able to do this really extensive advocacy, touring, and programming. So it's really taking things to the next level for you folks.
Yes, it's going to be a whole new program for us, and one that is going to hit the heart of cattle country in both education circles, sewing circles, knitting circles. We're going to go to the heart of it with it, so we can do something from the inside. Imagine going to one of those cowboy churches. Do you know what a cowboy church is?
I've heard, yeah.
You ever heard of a cowboy?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's I want to go to cowboy churches, and I want to show the, pieces of the documentary there, have readings from the book at places like that, so that I can see people change that are just like us.
Amazing, amazing, Renee. So, one question I have is that we're all on the same team with trying to sort of get folks to open up to the idea of veganism and transition and everything. Obviously, your film is going to speak to people on any part of the spectrum, people that are almost there, like city folks, but they also people that are in the country and are very much in farm country. We often go after to try to be, help veganize people that are low hanging fruit, like people that are already pretty close, like they're into other social justice, they're urban and all that sort of thing. Renee, why do you think it's so important to try veganizing people in the heart of cattle country? Why, what does that do for the movement?
What that does is it gets to the heart of the people that everybody thinks can't be penetrated. People think that this demographic can't be penetrated. They're villainized, the right, the Christian conservatives are villainized. I hear it all the time. See, I come from that. That doesn't mean I'm still that, but I come from that. I speak that language. And so, I am able to have those conversations with those people so that we can start a groundswell of change so that my story is not considered an anomaly. There needs to be more stories where cattle ranchers go vegan and that they become animal rights activists. And so I'm going to use my story in a way through the film and the book to hopefully encourage others to do the same.
Mm-hmm. And from a strategic point of view, when we can see a cattle rancher go vegan, when people can see that, they're like, well, what the hell is my excuse? Like, really, it really opens up people to go, wow, if somebody who was in the know and it was part of their identity and it was part of their life, in such a big way, if they can change, maybe I can change. It means changing my diet. It means, maybe not having turkey at Thanksgiving. Maybe I can change, right? Renee, is that sort of the idea?
Maybe they could change, and it gives them an opportunity to say out loud that they love these animals.
Yes.
They really don't want to send them to sale barns. They don't know what else to do. Yeah. That's how RAP was born, really. The Rancher Advocacy Program was created as a result of hearing over and over again, particularly the wives, talking about their feelings for the cows they send to the sale barn. Mm-hmm. And that's how it happened. I mean, they need to be heard. See, I'm also in recovery. I've been in recovery a long time. And one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic can talk in a way that nobody else can hear them. Nobody can talk to another alcoholic except another alcoholic in recovery. It's the same thing with cattle ranching. Nobody can really hear or talk or understand unless you have been there, done that. So cattle ranchers that go vegan for the animals are great advocates for cattle ranchers that start getting their light bulbs turned on, because they all care. They just need to be able to hear themselves talk through issues with somebody that understands.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Renee, we are so happy that you are out there doing this work, that you're being an ambassador, and now that your incredible story and your incredible spirit is going to be out there on an international, even more of an international level with this documentary. Very excited about it. We will do our best to support it. And also, Kirsten, can you just put Rowdy Girl Sanctuary, and you can check out Rowdy Girl Sanctuaries, all of the work that is being done, so many great programs that Renee is heading up, and be able to explore what's happening. Renee, thank you so much for your beautiful time. Kirsten, can you take us off Spotlight? And then Renee, if you can go to the gallery view so you can see folks back here in our crew. Turn on your cameras if they're not on, folks, because we are going to give Renee a great big Animal Justice Academy thank you. Oh, Renee, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kimberly. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, we'll see you in Toronto, Renee.
Yes, come say hi, please.
Excellent. And folks, we will see you at our panel April 20th, Thursday evening, 7 p.m. Thank you all for joining us. And Renee, we're behind you. Good luck, lady. kill them in a good way.
I think,
Bye.
I see you, Natasha. Bye.